If you're still struggling with anger and find that anger is still taking control over you, this video is for you. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you in this video how anger is created inside of us from a psychological and subconscious point of view. And some of these things you're going to know, and some of these things you might not know. So it's worth learning how anger is created inside your mind, especially if you're experiencing it at a level where it almost feels uncontrollable, or at least at a level where maybe you're not really proud of it. And of course, I want to share with you some ways that you can gain control over that anger so you don't have to feel like it's controlling your life anymore. Now, before we continue, let me just share again who I am. My name's Alan Galang. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and I'm a 20-year neuro-linguistic programming instructor and practitioner, which means that I started off just like you. I used to have emotional anger, sadness issues when I was in my early 20s. I actually tried committing suicide by the time I was 24. And utilizing these techniques, these things that I'm sharing with you today, and many other things that I'm going to share in the future, I've had to use these techniques on myself to rebuild my mind, to rebuild strength in my emotions, not to learn how to utilize these tools to understand what makes me tick, what makes me get triggered, and what helps me remain calm. And that's why I want to share this with you today, because not only has this helped me, but it's also helped hundreds of people that I've been fortunate enough to go out and serve and help them rebuild their lives, their friendships, their relationships, their careers. I've been very lucky to meet a lot of people along the way. And I just want to share with you some of the things that I've learned that have helped me and them rebuild and improve their life in hopes that it also helps you. So let's get into it. I'm going to use this piece of paper here to draw and illustrate. I'm going to cut this in half. So I draw this line in the middle. What this represents here on this side is two different versions of our emotions. And here's what I mean. I want you to imagine that the circle represents your brain. And any time that your brain makes a decision to either get happy or get angry or to get sad, depressed, anxious, nervous, fearful, any emotion that you feel, the brain can only produce those emotions if those experiences are processed through the five senses. And our five senses, again, is what you see, what you taste, what you hear, what you smell, and what you physically feel on your body. Okay? Five senses. Now, here's where it gets interesting. For all the people that I've helped, and maybe you can answer this question as well. Whenever I ask somebody, tell me the time or tell me the situation that you remember where when you think about it, it just makes you so angry. And usually what happens is a person will tell me a collection of stories, or they'll tell me one or two or three that are just really at like the 10 out of 10 anger level for them. The thing where they just think about it for a second and instantly that can transform the way that they feel. I learned this from a very brilliant man. His name is Mr. Richard Bandler. And Richard Bandler is the co-creator. Oops, can't spell today. Richard Bandler. There we go. He's the co-creator, founder, and developer of neuro-linguistic programming. And what he discovered from talking to hundreds of people who were regular individuals like you and I, all the way to counselors, to therapists, to psychiatrists, to psychotherapists, and the whole list, is what he learned is when people get really emotional, positive or negative, if it's something that really triggers your emotion, let's say it's anger, what he discovered is that visually, when they try to remember, like, what did that look like? What did that scene look like? A lot of times he found out that the visualization, the memory was large. In most cases, not often, but in most cases, they imagined this huge image of the thing that happened to them, whether it was somebody that hurt them physically or emotionally, or somebody they felt cheated, or they felt embarrassed or abandoned, or they felt like somebody ruined them. The image in their mind was crystal clear and it was very large in their mind. Oftentimes, they also see it in first person perspective. So they also see it in a way where when they close their mind, they actually relive it versus being able to close their eyes and imagine the scenario playing out. And then they see a copy or a version of themselves interacting in that incident. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time people see it in first person. Additionally, what they find is that if there was some sort of physical contact, let's say a person slapped them, grabbed them, punched them, kicked them, something aggressive, or let's say they got into a car accident, whatever what the situation is, when Richard would ask them, tell me about what you felt, a lot of times that person would say, I can still feel the pressure when he or she slapped me on the face. I can still feel the pain when that person gripped my wrist and wasn't willing to let me go. I still remember the pain when I accidentally dropped that hammer on my foot. Oh my goodness, I feel it like it just happened yesterday. So the image that they create is very real to them. When they close their eyes, they're able to relive that experience. Also, the auditory, not always, but often, Richard would ask, okay, can you still hear any sounds or voices from that person or that place or that situation? And again, oftentimes that person would say, yeah, I can hear that person screaming at me. I can hear that person yelling at me. I can hear the sound of their voice as they're calling me names. Or I can still hear the crash of the cars when that car crashed, or when the building collapsed, or when that thing fell apart and it fell on me. Whatever the case is, when they think about that feeling again or that sound again, they can replay the sound in their mind and almost hear it as if it's replaying again. And oftentimes, he would ask, okay, so when you're feeling this negative emotion, what happens in your body? Like, where do you feel it? Interestingly enough, a lot of people who feel anxiety can oftentimes feel a pressure that's either on their throat, their chest, or down their stomach. A lot of times it's center-lined, not always, but often. Other times when people feel fear or they feel like they're overthinking, a lot of times they feel this pressure that goes around their head or in the back or the sides of their head. So there's even a kinesthetic, what we call kinesthetic, or physical feeling, a physical contact that happens when we're thinking about an emotional negative situation. And here's where it gets interesting. What Richard Bandler did is he discovered through trial and error and years of discovery is he was able to take that same person who was going through the same problems, and he was able to change the way that they perceived or they saw the problem, the challenging situation, the memory. And just by changing the modalities as in what they saw, what they heard, what they maybe smelled or tasted, or what they felt in their body, by changing the locations and the sizes of these modalities, it oftentimes was able to help rewire the way the person experienced that situation. Meaning, a lot of times the person who felt this level of pain could all of a sudden feel this level of emotional pain or emotional discomfort. So an example would be this. Richard Bandler would say, hey, if you see it as like large as life, and you see it in color, he'd say, look at it as if it were shaded or if it was black and white. And a person would usually say, like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And then he would say, look, just play with me. Pretend you're 10 years old, pretend you're a child, and just allow yourself to use your imagination, which is really huge. It's key, by the way, because this is the brain and this is the front of the brain. all the information that we receive, like the life experiences, it gets processed through the conscious brain here in the front. But the emotions and the memory stored, especially when we're talking about long-term memories, that gets bypassed. Eventually it passes through the conscious brain and it gets stored here in the mega bank that we call the subconscious. And this is really important because if the subconscious stores that information as being really big, like a big scene, a big scenario, and it looks scary, it looks uncomfortable, well, guess what happens? That's how the person relives the experience. So what he did is he said, hey, just play with me for a second here. Pretend like you're a child, which again, he has to say that because the subconscious operates predominantly as a child. The subconscious records a whole bunch of information from 0 to 7 years old. So okay, from 0 to 7 years old, somebody just came in. From 0 to 7 years old, that is when the majority of a person's belief systems and character is formed. So whatever they experience during that time, from 0 to 7, that version of discomfort or pain or disbeliefs or beliefs, that gets reprocessed into adult age. More on that in a different video. But in this video, I just want you to understand that the subconscious acts like a kid. So you got to talk to it like a kid in order to make the change. So Richard Bandler would say, hey, change that to black and white and tell me what you see. Like, tell me how that, when you see that, like, how does that affect you? And of course, if a person's really resistant, they'll be like, I don't see anything different. What are you talking about? But then if a person would just relax and allow themselves to try, like honestly try to make an effort, oftentimes a person would say, hey, yeah, it still bothers me, but not as much. Interesting. And then he would say, okay, you said that you saw this as larger than life. How about we do this? Why don't we just shrink it to maybe half the size of what you normally saw? What you saw, like when you replay this image in your mind, this memory, let yourself bring it down to about half the frame size. And so a person would try it, and, they would see it as being shrunken, like almost looking through like a smaller TV or a computer monitor, or even like a laptop or a cell phone. And eventually he would say, well, so, as you're looking at this problem now, how does it impact you? What's different? And again, oftentimes a person would say, hey, it still bothers me, but less. Interesting. And then he would go on to check, like, is there any voices or sounds that you're hearing? And if a person said yes, he would say, okay, so I want you to take the sounds of that person's voice and every sound you heard from that memory, and I want you to change the pitch. So make the volume higher. I want you to give everyone a Mickey Mouse sounding voice. So the person yelling at you, screaming at you, making you uncomfortable, I want you to make them sound like Mickey Mouse. And at first, of course, it's, odd because we're adults. That's not something we normally do. But if a person's willing to try, they would say, okay, let me give this a shot. Let me give it a shot. And then they would try to imagine a Mickey Mouse voice in their head. And then all of a sudden you could see that their emotional feelings would start to shift again. And then Bandler would say, hey, everything that you're seeing, that you're hearing right now, and that you're seeing, I want you to imagine that's playing in front of you, almost like a video. But now I want you to play everything backwards. So everybody's walking backwards, talking backwards. They're doing everything they're doing, passing things off, sharing things. They're exchanging things backwards. Everything's playing backwards, including your voice, their voice, and yours too, if you're part of that scene. Now, some people would have a hard time with this, but others would say, okay, I'll give it a shot. And the most common thing would come up where they would say, it sounds weird. Like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like, it doesn't make sense. And it was interesting because Bandler would look at them and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? And how does that make you feel? And almost by surprise, the person he's working with would usually say something like, oh, yeah, it still bugs me, but it bugs me from like this down to like this. So in conclusion, what am I trying to describe here? What I'm trying to describe is that every single situation that we experience and that we go through, the information is collected in a certain syntax. Syntax, again, and I've said this in previous videos, but I want to share again. It's just a fancy word for a specific order and way of doing things. Kind of like a phone number. If we have a phone number here, that would be a syntax. Okay, let's just say it was 555-871-2178. Let's just say. Now, this is a syntax because when you type in this number, you get one specific person. Now, what happens to this syntax if you change even one phone number in this order? Just one. Do you get the same person at the other end of the phone call? Absolutely not. You get an entirely different result. Usually the result that you don't want, or something very different. Well, just like the phone number, your mind works in the same way. And it's really important that when you notice that you're getting angry or upset or sad, it's a different worksheet. It's very important to be able to record, how is your mind record these painful or hurtful or negative kinds of situations. Now, what I want to leave you with today is this. So number one, in order to re-empower yourself and gain more control over your own emotions, it's really important to know, how do your emotions, like what kind of syntax does your mind create to produce the emotion of being angry or being sad or being depressed or being hurt or whatever feeling that you're going through. And the easiest way is to do this. Number one, you pull out a clean sheet of paper, just like what I have here. Number two, you write down all the visual, all the auditory, and all the physical experiences that you have on a given situation. Now, let's just say, for example, that you get into a fight or an argument with your kids or your spouse. I use that as an example because it's super common. We hear it all the time, and we help people overcome those negative feelings so that way they can stay calm during heated arguments and heated situations, so they can better communicate with their loved ones. The first thing that we do is we ask them, visually, in your mind, how do you see the situation when you replay it in your head? Do you see it in color, or do you see it in black and white? Now, most people will say one or the other. Sometimes they say both. Like in certain moments it's color, certain moments it's black and white. It's really important that if you want to control your emotions, you got to know how your mind recreates these scenarios. So number one, find out, is it color or in black and white? Number two, you're going to want to find out the size. Does your mind perceive the memory as being like on an IMAX theater, something super huge? Or is it a little bit more real to life size? Or is it a little bit more like here, how you're watching me right now through your computer screen or through your cell phone? You want to be able to record the size of the image, because that tells you, and it'll show you, it'll indicate to you how your mind perceives an image and what size it needs to be in order to trigger these negative emotions. And yes, believe me, size does matter. Next, you're going to want to find out the auditory, in other words, the sounds. The sounds. So in other words, number one, Are there any voices that you hear in this memory? If you have voices, you're going to want to record who are those voices and what are they saying? So if I was working with you, if I was working with a client, I would actually have them tell me, like, who is that person? And they would say, oh, it's my spouse, my kid, my son, my daughter, my mom, my dad, my coworker, my buddy, whoever. And we would mark that down. And then I would find out what is the words that they're saying to you that triggers this negative emotion out of you. And they would tell me things like, well, he said, I'm a jerk. Or he said, I'm selfish. Or he said, I don't care about you, I care about me. Or whatever that is that they're saying. Whatever the words were that they perceived their friend or their other person that said it, we would write that down as well. So for you, I would suggest you do the same. And as well, you would find out when you recall this memory, are you hearing it from the left ear? Or does it sound like it's coming more out of the right ear? Or when you recall the memory, does it sound like it's coming from both? Everybody's different. And for you, if you're doing this exercise with me right now, you could probably figure out which side or both sides where this sounds or these sounds are coming from. And of course, lastly, the physical part. It's what we call the kinesthetic reaction. All right, physical for simplicity. The kinesthetic reaction or the physical reaction is when you think about this incident, when you relive this, what do you feel in your body? Now, for an example, oftentimes people would say, I feel this tightness. It's this tightness, Alan, that's in my chest, or sometimes it's in their head, or sometimes it's in their stomach or their gut, or sometimes it's in a different part of their body. Wherever they feel it, I would then ask them again to record it. And then I would ask them, does it feel like it's staying there or does it feel like it's moving around? Interestingly enough, some people would say, no, I feel it here in my stomach and it moves up to my throat and it goes back to my stomach. It's almost like doing this oval type of circle. Some other people would say, well, I feel in my chest, but it's like it's in there and it feels deep. Like it's just deeply penetrating and very out. It just hurts when I think about it. Whatever that physical or kinesthetic reaction is for you, you want to write that down. Because once you have this information, guess what? Just like a phone number, 1236411, just like a phone number, which is a syntax, your body is signaling to you the syntax of your fear, of your worry, of your sadness, of your negative emotion, whatever it is that you're experiencing. And once you have this syntax, once you have this information down, guess what? You are halfway there to regaining control over the way you feel, no matter what the situation is that happens in front of you. Now, I should say this really quick because sometimes people assume, Alan, so what are you saying? That if somebody in my life, somebody close to me passes away, I'm not going to feel sad? Or if I get into a car accident, I'm not going to get angry? Or somebody, rips me off, I'm not going to be pissed? No, I'm not saying that at all. Of course you're going to feel those feelings. I'm not saying, as I write this, I don't want you to assume that you're just going to be numb. What I mean is that during certain moments when we have what we call negative situations happen, the goal of this exercise is not to avoid those feelings. You need them. We need them. Those are the signals of life that tell us where the direction of our life is going. But they're not meant to stay. You're not meant to stay stuck with something that happened to you a year ago, 5 years ago, 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years ago. You're not meant to relive the pain from something that happened in your past. When something happens to us, we're supposed to feel it in the moment because it's life. We have ups and we have downs. But it's not supposed to linger and become a tormentor for us, which is what happens to so many of us when we don't understand the code or the syntax of what our brain requires to create these negative feelings. When you go through a bad rut in life, feel that pain, feel that discomfort in the moment, for sure. Just don't let that pain or discomfort stay there when the moment is over, or else you lose the juice, the love, the life experience, the excitement of what life really has to offer you. And that's something that none of us deserve to miss out on, because if without the highs, then the lows just become lower. And if we don't feel the highs and the lows, then we can't tell the contrast between the two. And that's the why I'm making you this video, is because if you're still watching this right now, chances are is that you're probably one of those people that feel a lot more lows than highs. You're probably somebody that goes through a lot more discomfort than noticing the feelings of joy, of happiness, of love, of pleasure, of desire, of excitement, of fulfillment. Those are experiences or feelings that you deserve to have too. And to turn those on, you got to learn to turn off, or at least control or minimize the bad feelings. Because kind of like a cup, if you fill it up with negative, how you can have room in there for the good stuff in your life. That's it for today's video. If you got questions or comments, please let me know. Make sure you leave them down below. And if you'd like to see the other half of this video on how do you turn on the good stuff, like how do you minimize these negative feelings to actually start feeling good, even when the outside environment doesn't support you to feel good, you can still turn that on anyway, which again, high-level achievers, people that are getting somewhere in their life many times, not always, but many times, those people have the ability to self-regulate their emotions. They have emotional restoration skills, which is what I'm providing you an introduction to today. If you want to know on how to do that for yourself at a beginner stage level, because this is through a video, I'm not working with you live, there's much more we can do for talking face-to-face, but over a video, if you would like to know some techniques on how to start regaining control over your feelings, then let me know. I'll produce that next video and the next time I make a video, okay? I hope this has been helpful for you. Again, any questions you got, let me know. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found this video to be helpful.